Hi, and thanks for joining us here at Rose Quartz Mediumship podcast, where we simply adore anything and everything healing and metaphysically based. I want to tell a story today about a client who I have worked with for a couple of years, and I've worked with her in multiple different capacities. She is part of our membership program. She has taken our 12-week personal development program called Aligned Surrender. And I work with her on a one-on-one basis, which I just recently started working with her on the one-on-one basis. I would occasionally see her previously, but now I'm seeing her on a more regular basis. And as part of that one-on-one work, the coaching work that we're doing together, she started to really identify that she wanted to feel more connected, and she wanted to have deeper, authentic belonging with friends. And so we started working towards that goal. And in that process, she had picked a mom friend in her community who she didn't know, but she felt like there was the potential for friendship there. And so she had sent her phone number home with her daughter to give to this friend's mom, to ask if she wanted to get together and go for a walk or have a cup of tea. And this is the interesting thing that happened, right? It's kind of a vulnerable thing to put yourself out there if you have not been in a space where you wanted to put yourself out there. So it's a pretty vulnerable act, right? To send your phone number home with your daughter to give to her friend so you could give it to the mom, to go for a walk, have a cup of tea, hang out a little bit, get to know each other as moms. And so she sent her phone number home with her daughter and then had to deal with the sensations that were coming up and the emotions that were coming up in the time period between sending her phone number home with her daughter and waiting to hear back from this mom friend. And so in that period of time where she was waiting, she recognized that she was uncomfortable. And instead of trying to get away from the discomfort, she really created the space and time to feel her feelings. And one day she had the sensation and emotion of inadequacy and kind of fear of rejection come up. And immediately she created a story in her mind about how this mom didn't want to be friends with her and how she was trying to figure out a way to kindly and gently not hang out with her. And in the moment that that experience was happening, she said that she could hear my voice in her head. And she could hear some of the lessons from our Aligned Surrender program. And in particular, there were kind of two things that were coming to her. The first is that the concept that we create stories in our mind all day, every day. And it's one of the modules in Aligned Surrender where I kind of break that concept down. And she recognized in the moment that it was happening that she was creating a story. And it was just that. It was a story. That was the story that her mind was telling, but that wasn't necessarily reality, right? That was a singular story because she didn't have enough details. I mean, for all she knew, her daughter had forgotten to pass the note with the phone number to her friend. Or maybe her daughter's friend had left it in her backpack. And so she recognized that she was telling a story. And in the moment, she paused and asked herself, is this story serving me? And she allowed herself to really be with the truth of the story that was coming up inside of her, right? In the somatic world, we really take this approach of being with the truth of what is happening inside of our body. And so she was with the truth of the story that was coming up in her body. And she also recognized that it was just that, a story. And honestly, it was kind of a bullshit story that she was telling herself. And she knew that too. She knew that this was her wounding and her trauma showing up in the form of a story in her mind. So that's piece number one. The second piece is something that we talked about in our membership program. And it's this concept that when you couple an emotion or a feeling with a thought pattern, that it is incredibly powerful. And that can both be in a way that serves us and in a way that doesn't serve us, right? But there's this kind of coupling that happens, and it's like a feeling thought rather than just a feeling or just a thought. And so she recognized that that was what was happening for her. And one of the things that we talk about in Rose Quartz Mediumship community is being able to separate out a feeling and a thought. Because those two things can often kind of couple together. So if I have a feeling of inadequacy, and then immediately I have this thought that kind of comes in and locks, so they happen at the same time. I feel inadequate, and then the thought is, you'll never have friends because you're not a good friend, and you don't bring value, and you don't have anything to offer, right? Like all these kind of lower vibration thought patterns that come in. If those two things couple together, that's an incredibly uncomfortable story to be holding, first of all. And second of all, it's incredibly powerful because when you couple a feeling and a thought, it creates a neural pathway significantly quicker than if you just have a feeling or you just have a thought. And so she recognized those two things were happening. One, she was telling herself a story that wasn't serving her, and she didn't have enough information, so she was literally just creating a story. And two, she recognized that she was coupling a feeling and a thought together. And so she practiced one of the things that we work on in our one-on-one sessions, which is how to decouple a feeling and a thought and have them separately. In the somatic world, a kind of core concept is that when there is energy that needs to be digested, that is done far more effectively in the body than it is done in the mind. And that's why if you've ever had a disagreement with somebody and you just notice that you are looping in mind and you're just going around and around and around and around and around in a mind loop, that's A, because it feels incomplete. There was something that felt incomplete there. And B, you're trying to digest the energy. And mind is the least effective channel at digesting energy. If you drop down into your body and you feel the sensations and you feel the emotion in your body, right? There's a difference between thinking an emotion and feeling an emotion inside of your body. So when you drop into body and you actually feel the thought pattern that you've been looping on, and you feel the emotion and you feel the sensations, you will notice that the energy digests. And then all of a sudden, you might see different stories. You might have new clarity. You might notice that what you think is possible opens up, and there's a larger scope of what is possible for you. And so somatics is incredibly effective at healing trauma, wounds that have happened in the past, but it's also an incredibly powerful tool at creating a different frequency that you function out of, right? So I'm a huge believer that we need to think about who we are being in any moment. And so in that moment, she was being a bit of a victim. And when she paused and she started decoupling the feeling and the thought, because the feeling and thought were not serving her, right? They were coupled in a way that was actually going to bring her frequency down. When you couple a feeling and a thought, in a way that brings your vibration or frequency up, that's really effective and you want to do that. But if you're coupling a feeling and a thought in a way that doesn't serve you, in a way that pulls your frequency or your vibration down, that isn't in alignment with the frequency that you're trying to live from, then decoupling the feeling and the thought and allowing the feeling to digest, and then you'll notice that the thoughts are going to be different. That is what she practiced. So she did the most beautiful thing, right? A, she recognized that she was in a process. B, she recognized that she was telling herself a bullshit story that was just in her mind. It was just a story in her mind. She didn't have enough information. And so she could actually create any story that she wanted. She could create the story that her daughter forgot to give the phone number. She could create the story that her daughter's friend had left it in her backpack or at school. She could tell the story that the piece of paper got lost. She could tell the story that the mom just hadn't even received it. Maybe she's out of town. She could tell a million stories, but the story that she was choosing to tell was one where she was being rejected because she wasn't enough. And so she recognized that wasn't a story that was going to serve her. And so she felt those feelings and then kind of put them on a shelf and said, this is a story. And then C, she recognized that she was coupling feelings and thoughts. And so instead of allowing the feeling of inadequacy or the feeling of nervousness waiting for this phone call or text or response from this mom, and the thought pattern that she wasn't enough to couple together, she started to practice what we teach in the Rose Quartz Mediumship community, which is how to decouple those two things and have a feeling and have a thought, but not have them lock in and be stuck together. And so she started feeling the sensation of nervous, and she started feeling the sensation of inadequacy. And she didn't allow her mind to make meaning of that. She stayed with the sensation. She stayed in her body. She felt the feelings. She felt the emotions. And as that energy digested, she recognized that the thought patterns that she was having were different. So instead of immediately thinking that this friend's mom was not going to call because she wasn't enough and she wasn't good enough and this mom didn't want to be her friend, all of these other stories started opening up. And the possibility that maybe the mom hadn't even received the number or the note. Or maybe she was busy and she needed to get through some things in order to respond. Or she was out of town, or various different other things could have happened. She noticed that as she digested the energy that was attached to the emotion of inadequacy and nervousness, the thought patterns changed because she'd had the ability to digest that energy and she didn't make it mean something. She decoupled the thought, the feeling, and the thought pattern. And what's really interesting is that as soon as she decoupled those things, as soon as she digested the energy of nervous and feeling of inadequacy and allowed that energy to be purged from her nervous system, new stories came in. She opened up her mind to the possibility that the mom was not rejecting her. And within an hour, the mom texted her and said, "I would love to go for a walk. Are you available?" And in our one-on-one session, we were talking about this. And I was asking her to pause and really celebrate herself. She was telling me this story and she was kind of moving through it quickly. And I asked her to pause. And I asked her to really be with her growth, to recognize that she has spent time in the Rose Quartz Mediumship community learning these tools, learning these skills. But this was the demonstration that she had integrated them, that she was actually using them, that in real time, in the moment that it was happening, she paused and she really shifted the frequency that she was sitting in. And she had a very different experience rather than creating this bullshit story and believing it and allowing herself to spiral. She allowed a different story to be there. That this mom was going to reach out to her, but that there were multiple different possibilities about why she hadn't yet. And then ultimately the mom did reach out to her and initiated a walk. And so we paused and we celebrated that. And the reason that I asked her to really pause and self-reflect was, one, I wanted her to see her growth. I think it is so important that we recognize our growth, especially when we're working hard at it. But also because I think when we bring our awareness to growth and when we celebrate our own growth, it reinforces for the universe, for God, for the divine, for love, however it is that you say that, it reinforces that we want more of that. It's like a gratitude practice, right? And I'm a huge believer that there's a big difference between thinking thank you or thinking some form of gratitude and actually feeling it in your body. Pausing for long enough to actually connect with the sensations that happen inside of your body when you are grateful. That is an entirely different gratitude practice. And if you make that shift, if you change from thinking about gratitude to feeling gratitude, your reality is going to shift. In the world of manifesting, I'm sure that you've heard that you need to feel something, right? You need to feel whatever it is that you're wanting. So when we feel gratitude in our body, there's a big difference between thinking and feeling the gratitude. And it reinforces for the universe, for God, for love, for the divine, that this is what we want, and it connects us to that frequency and that vibration. And when we are in that frequency and when we are in that vibration, we attract, through law of attraction, things of a similar vibration. And so we paused and we celebrated and we felt the sensations that went along with this recognition of this beautiful integration of her learning, that she had in fact shifted her reality. And that was just a way of reinforcing for the universe that she wanted more of this, that she wanted more of these experiences, that she wanted more of this frequency, that growth and expansion and healing felt good, and that she was willing to accept more of it. And I wanted to share that story with you because I think it is a beautiful story. And I think that it breaks down how this work can be done in a way that happens in real time, in life, as it's happening. And that is how we really change our reality. When we shift the way that we're showing up and who we are being in the moment that something is happening. In the moment where I could be telling a story that I'm rejected because I'm not enough, the real question is, who am I being in that moment? When I'm waiting to hear back from this mom, who am I being? Who was she being? And she changed it in that moment. And that is how you change the frequency and the vibration that you are sitting in, which changes the reality of your life. We really appreciate you being here with us at Rose Quartz Mediumship podcast, and I hope you have a beautiful morning, day, evening, or night, wherever it is that this podcast meets you.